It was a calm evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The streets were lined with neat houses, each with its own small garden, trimmed lawns, and porch lights flickering gently as the sun began to set. Birds were singing their last songs before nightfall, and the air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass. In one of those houses lived a couple who had always felt safe and comfortable in their home. Life for them had been peaceful for years. They had built a small routine, simple yet full of small joys. On this particular evening, the wife was in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing a light dinner. The husband was outside putting away some gardening tools, enjoying the soft glow of the fading sun on his face. For a long time, their relationship with the neighborhood's homeowners association, or HOA, had been polite but distant. They had received the occasional notice about rules or guidelines, usually minor things like trimming hedges or repainting fences. Most people might have seen these as trivial, but over time, the couple had noticed subtle tension growing between themselves and a few members of the HOA. Nothing major had ever happened, nothing violent or threatening. But there were whispers, odd glances during neighborhood meetings, and small, unexplained incidents like moved garbage cans or unasked-for warnings left at the doorstep. On this evening, however, something felt different. The wife paused mid-chop and glanced out the kitchen window toward the driveway. At first, she thought she was imagining it. There at the edge of the lawn stood a small group of people. They were wearing uniforms, dark shirts with badges that gleamed faintly in the setting sun. She frowned. Something about them seemed off. The way they stood, the way they scanned the yard. It wasn't the usual polite formality she expected from the HOA. Her stomach tightened, an uneasy feeling spreading slowly through her chest. "Do you see them?" She called softly to her husband, trying not to let panic creep into her voice. He walked over to the window and squinted. "Who?" he asked, shading his eyes. "The people out there." "By the driveway," she replied. He stepped closer, trying to make sense of the scene. There were 3 of them, all wearing what looked like official-looking jackets, badges pinned to their chests. But something about their posture, the way they carried themselves, felt strange. They weren't police officers. He had seen real cops before, and these people didn't move or speak like trained law enforcement. Their presence was deliberate, but there was an aggressive edge to it. The husband's first instinct was to stay calm. He had always believed in handling things rationally, without unnecessary confrontation. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. He walked outside slowly, waving his hand casually to get the attention of the group. "Can I help you?" he called, keeping his voice steady but firm. The 3 individuals turned as one, their expressions unreadable. One of them, a man with a sharp face and a clipped haircut, stepped forward. "We need to speak with your wife," he said, his tone curt and slightly harsh. "She's right here," the husband said, gesturing toward the kitchen window. "Is there a problem?" The man's eyes flicked toward the window, then back to the husband. "It's about a violation," he said. "There are rules she's not following, and we need to address it immediately." The husband raised an eyebrow. "Violation of what?" "HOA rules," the man replied, his voice flat. "You'll see once we talk to her." The husband's stomach sank a little. He had a feeling that this was not going to be a simple conversation. Over the past few months, there had been subtle signs of tension, but nothing had prepared him for this level of confrontation. He could see that the wife, standing in the kitchen, was now watching carefully. She didn't panic, but her hands were gripping the counter a little tighter than usual. Her calm exterior masked a nervous energy beneath, the kind that comes when someone senses danger but hasn't yet seen it fully. "Okay," the husband said slowly. "Why don't you come inside? We can talk here calmly." The man shook his head. "We need to speak with her outside." "It's a procedure." Something about that word, procedure, felt menacing. It was not meant to reassure, it was meant to intimidate. The husband felt a surge of protectiveness. He stepped a little closer to the door, placing himself between the strangers and the kitchen. "No, we're not doing anything outside," he said firmly. "She can talk to you through the door if you need." The man with the clipped haircut glanced at his companions, and the 3 of them exchanged looks that were hard to interpret. There was a brief, tense silence. Then, unexpectedly, one of the other 2 men took a step forward, his hand brushing against the belt that held what looked like equipment. The sight made the husband flinch. He realized they were trying to intimidate him, to show that they had power over the situation. "I think you need to leave," the husband said, trying to keep his voice calm but firm. "We haven't done anything wrong." The first man's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand. This is not optional. We're enforcing the rules." The wife, seeing the tension escalate, stepped toward the door. Her voice was calm but steady. "I don't see what rule I'm breaking. Please explain it to me." The man sneered slightly, his expression almost contemptuous. "You'll see soon enough," he said. There was a coldness to his tone, the kind that made the air feel heavier, as if the night itself had thickened. Suddenly, one of the men moved closer than anyone should. The wife instinctively took a step back, but he didn't stop. There was a flicker of fear in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. The husband moved in front of her immediately, putting himself between her and the strangers. "Step back," he warned. "You're not touching her." The man froze for a moment, then laughed softly, a sound that was low and unpleasant. "We're just enforcing the rules," he said, as if that justified their aggressive stance. By now, a few neighbors had noticed the confrontation. Some came to their windows, watching quietly, unsure what to do. The tension in the street was palpable. It wasn't loud, but it was heavy, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe normally. The wife, gathering her courage, spoke again. "If you have any complaints, you need to do it properly. You are not police. You cannot just come here and intimidate me like this." The first man's eyes flicked with irritation, and for a moment the husband thought he might try to make a move. But instead he stepped back slightly, as if calculating his next move. "Watch your tone," he said sharply. "You will regret this." Something inside the husband snapped. He realized that they were not just being strict. They were trying to scare his wife, to assert power in a way that was completely illegal. He kept his voice steady but firm. "If you don't leave now, I will call the police. I'm not joking." For a moment, the three men hesitated. Then, almost simultaneously, they made a move that no one expected. One of them shoved the wife lightly. Not enough to hurt her, but enough to make a point. It was shocking, terrifying, and completely uncalled for. The husband stepped in immediately, blocking her and pushing the man away. "Enough," he shouted. "You're done here. Leave now." The man with the clipped haircut's face twisted with anger. "This isn't over," he hissed, but he stepped back, signaling to his companions. They looked around, seemingly assessing the situation, then slowly moved toward their vehicle parked at the end of the driveway. The wife was shaking, but she held herself upright, her hands pressed against her chest as if to calm her racing heartbeat. "Are you okay?" the husband asked, his voice gentle but full of concern. "I will be," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But that was wrong. They had no right." The couple watched as the strangers got into their vehicles. The men were leaving, but the memory of what had just happened lingered like a shadow. Something inside them had changed. Their sense of safety, their belief that their home was a sanctuary, had been violated. That night they sat together in the living room, talking quietly about what had just happened. They went over every detail, trying to make sense of the confrontation and realizing how close it had come to turning violent. The wife's hands were still trembling, and the husband could feel his own anger simmering beneath the surface. They both knew that this was only the beginning, that their lives had shifted in a way they couldn't yet fully understand. Outside, the street returned to its quiet rhythm. But inside the house there was a storm of fear, confusion, and determination. They had been tested in ways they never expected, and neither of them would ever forget the feeling of those strangers standing at their doorstep, trying to assert power where they had no right. The calm of the evening was gone, replaced by a sense of vigilance, a feeling that nothing would ever be quite the same again. As they finally went to bed, the couple lay awake, each lost in thought. The wife stared at the ceiling, replaying the events over and over while the husband thought about what steps they would need to take next. One thing was certain: they would not be intimidated. They would protect their home, their dignity, and each other. And although they didn't yet know how, they both understood that a battle had just begun, a battle that would test their courage, their resolve, and their unity. And so, the first part of their story ended not with closure, but with the uneasy knowledge that life had changed forever, and that the peace they had always taken for granted was no longer guaranteed. The next morning, the couple woke to an uneasy quiet. The sun streamed through the blinds, but it didn't feel warm or comforting. The events from the previous evening were still heavy on their minds. They both had trouble sleeping. waking several times during the night to make sure the doors were locked and the windows secured. Now, as they sat at the kitchen table with coffee in hand, neither knew how to start the day. The wife took a deep breath and tried to focus on normal things, like the sound of the coffee percolator or the smell of toast.
"I keep thinking about last night," she said softly.
It wasn't just intimidation. They were aggressive. And why would they come here like that? The husband nodded, his jaw tight. "I know, it doesn't make sense. They weren't real officers, but they acted like they had authority. It felt like they wanted to humiliate you." He paused, swirling his coffee. "We need to figure out who they really are and why they think they can do this." They knew they couldn't ignore it. The people who came to their home were dangerous in ways that were hard to define. They weren't just rude neighbors or petty complainers. Their behavior was calculated, deliberate, and threatening. And the worst part was they had started this without warning, without reason, without any authority. The day passed slowly, the couple moving through routine tasks with distracted minds. The wife went outside to tend to her small garden, hoping that the familiar work of planting and trimming would calm her. But every rustle of the leaves, every passing car made her glance up. She felt eyes on her even when she was alone. The husband stayed inside, reviewing the events in his mind, trying to remember every detail. He wanted to know what they could do legally, what options they had to protect themselves. By mid-afternoon, the tension had grown to a point where ignoring it was no longer possible. The husband suggested they take a walk around the neighborhood, not to confront anyone, but to show that they were calm and vigilant. They wanted to understand the environment better, to see if there were any signs of the HOA's presence that day. As they walked slowly down the street, neighbors waved politely, some with curious looks. It was clear that news of the previous evening had already spread, though no one spoke openly. The couple sensed a mixture of sympathy and caution in the way people looked at them. When they returned home, there was a knock at the door. The wife froze. Her heart skipped a beat, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. The husband went to the door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. Outside stood a man in a uniform, similar to the ones from last night. His face was unreadable, but the tension in the air was immediate and sharp. "Do they dare come back?" the wife whispered, her voice trembling. The husband took a deep breath. "We'll handle it calmly. Don't panic." He opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" The man's voice was cold and clipped. "We need to speak to your wife. There's a violation that must be addressed immediately." The wife stepped closer to the door, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't know what violation you mean. Please explain it properly." The man ignored her. He stepped closer, just far enough to make a point, his eyes scanning the yard as if it belonged to him. There was a deliberate threat in his posture, an unspoken message that they were in control. The husband positioned himself in front of the wife. "You're not coming in here," he said firmly. "If you have any complaints, we handle them legally, not like this. Leave now." The man's face hardened. "This is not optional. You will cooperate." Before the husband could react, the man reached out and slapped the wife across the face. The sound echoed in the small hallway. Shock and disbelief froze them for a moment. The wife staggered, a sharp pain burning across her cheek. The husband moved instantly, gripping the man's arm and pushing him back. "Enough," he shouted, his voice filled with anger and protective instinct. "You have no right to touch her." The man stumbled backward but recovered quickly, smirking. His two companions had appeared from the side, circling slowly as if sizing them up. It was clear now that this was not just a single act of aggression. They had come prepared, confident, and reckless. The wife pressed her hand to her cheek, her eyes wide but determined. "You are going too far. I am calling the police, now." That seemed to strike a nerve. The man's smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by irritation. "You don't understand the consequences. You'll regret this." The husband held his ground. "I understand perfectly. You have no authority here. Step away from my wife and my home, or I will make sure the proper authorities deal with you." The standoff was tense. Minutes felt like hours. The couple could feel the weight of every moment, the danger hanging over them like a storm cloud. Their hearts raced, adrenaline pumping, but their determination never wavered. They would not allow themselves to be bullied or harmed in their own home. Suddenly, one of the men lunged forward, aiming to grab the wife again. The husband reacted instantly, blocking the move and pushing the man back. In the scuffle, the man lost his balance and hit the side of his head on the edge of the driveway. A sharp cry of pain broke the tense silence. His companions rushed to his side, panic flashing in their eyes. The couple stepped back, careful not to escalate further. They watched as the three men struggled to regain control of themselves. The incident had spiraled in a way that no one had planned. The aggressors, who had come with confidence and authority, now seemed vulnerable and exposed. Their own recklessness had caused them harm. At that moment, the wife called emergency services. She explained what had happened, emphasizing that they were the victims and that the men had assaulted her. The dispatcher reassured her that help was on the way. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the neighborhood. Police cars and ambulances arrived, responding to the call. The couple stayed together, holding each other close, their hearts still pounding. The men were attended to by paramedics, who checked them for injuries sustained in the scuffle. The police began taking statements asking the couple to recount the events in detail. Every word, every movement, every gesture had to be described, documented, and recorded. The couple cooperated fully, determined to ensure that the truth would be clear and that no part of this ordeal could be misrepresented. Neighbors had gathered, some whispering, some watching in stunned silence. The couple could feel a mix of support and curiosity from the community. The incident was unusual, disturbing, and unforgettable. Everyone knew that it was more than a minor conflict. It was a serious violation of trust, authority, and law. After the police had taken initial statements and the paramedics had stabilized the men, the couple returned to their home. The tension did not leave immediately. They spent hours checking locks, securing windows, and making sure that every part of their property was safe. The wife applied a cold pack to her cheek, trying to soothe the sting and the swelling. The husband sat nearby, his mind racing, thinking about the next steps. They realized that the confrontation had changed everything. Their home, once a place of calm and comfort, now carried a memory of fear, aggression, and violation. But despite the anger and shock, a sense of resolve grew inside them. They knew they had faced danger head-on and had protected each other. They had remained calm under pressure, and that gave them strength. As night fell again, they sat together on the couch, talking quietly. The wife, still rubbing her cheek gently, looked at her husband. "We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. They can't get away with it." "I know," he said, taking her hand. "We will take the proper steps. We'll involve the authorities, document everything, and make sure they face consequences. We have to protect ourselves and our home. No one can ever intimidate us like that again." They knew the days ahead would be challenging. There would be reports, investigations, and possibly more encounters. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment to breathe, to process the fact that they had survived a direct attack on their safety and dignity. They were shaken, yes, but not defeated. That night, they went to bed with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. They had faced aggression, they had faced intimidation, and they had protected themselves. The events of the day had proven one thing clearly: their home was theirs, and their courage was stronger than the threats against them. Though the confrontation had left scars, physical, emotional, and mental, it had also revealed the depth of their bond, the trust and unity they shared. Together they had faced chaos and aggression, and together they would face whatever came next. And as they drifted into a wary sleep, the memory of the slaps, the threats, and the reckless strangers lingered in their minds, reminding them that life could change in an instant. But it also reminded them that resilience, love, and courage could hold steady, even in the most dangerous storms. The morning after the confrontation, the couple woke to a sense of unease that was almost physical. Their home, which had always felt like a safe haven, now seemed fragile and vulnerable. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside made them startle. Even the faint hum of the refrigerator sounded unusually loud. They had survived a direct threat to their safety, but the memory of the man slapping the wife lingered like a dark cloud over their heads. The wife sat at the kitchen table, her hand still slightly swollen from the slap. She pressed it gently against her cheek, wincing as she remembered the moment. "I keep thinking about how fast it all happened," she said quietly. "One second they were threatening, the next, it was over, but it wasn't really over." The husband nodded, staring out the window at the quiet street. "It's not over until it's dealt with properly," he replied. "We need to make sure this doesn't happen again, and we have to make sure it never happens to anyone else." They spent the morning gathering evidence. They went through the security camera footage, reviewing every detail of the previous day's events. The images of the men in their fake uniforms, their threatening postures, and the shove and slap were all there. Clear and undeniable. The husband printed out copies of the footage and photographs, carefully labeling them and noting the time and date. They wanted to create a record that could not be ignored, something that would speak louder than any threats or lies from the perpetrators. While they worked, neighbors began to emerge cautiously from their homes. A few approached, hesitant but concerned. "We saw what happened yesterday," one neighbor said quietly. "Those men were out of line. You didn't deserve that." "Thank you," the wife said, trying to smile, though her face still carried the redness of the slap. "It was frightening, but we're trying to handle it the right way." The support of their neighbors was comforting. It reminded them that they were not alone and that the community was watching, yet they also realized that the HOA, or at least some members of it, had a network that extended beyond casual encounters. They had to be careful with whom they spoke and what they said. By midday, the husband suggested calling a lawyer. They needed professional guidance to understand their options. They sat together on the couch, scrolling through potential contacts, reading reviews, and making calls. After several attempts, they found a lawyer who specialized in civil rights and harassment cases. The lawyer listened carefully as they recounted the events, taking notes and asking detailed questions about the incident. "This is serious," the lawyer said. "You've been assaulted and those individuals have impersonated authority figures. There are multiple violations here. You can pursue legal action and you should. You also need to document everything going forward, so keep a detailed record of any interactions." The couple nodded. The sense of validation from someone outside the situation was reassuring. It confirmed what they already felt. This was not just a neighborhood dispute. It was an attack, and it needed to be addressed with seriousness and precision. After the call with the lawyer, they decided to take a walk, partly to clear their minds, and partly to regain a sense of normalcy. The neighborhood was quiet, but the air carried a different feeling now. Where there had been calm and order, there was now vigilance. Every passerby, every car, every sound was measured against the previous day's events. As they walked, they noticed small changes. A few neighbors were whispering, pointing subtly toward their house. Some offered tentative smiles and nods of encouragement. Others avoided eye contact, perhaps unsure of how involved they wanted to be. The couple realized that word of the incident had spread, and while it brought support, it also brought attention that could be complicated. They had to be careful in navigating the social dynamics of the neighborhood while maintaining their safety. Returning home, they prepared for the possibility that the HOA members might try to return. They reinforced doors and windows, checked locks, and made sure that their security cameras were functioning correctly. The wife placed a small mirror near the front window, giving her a better view of anyone approaching the house. Every precaution was taken, not out of paranoia but out of necessity. They had learned the hard way that threats could come in unexpected forms. In the late afternoon, the couple received a call from the local police department. The officer on the line wanted to follow up on the previous day's report. He asked them to come down to the station to provide formal statements and to review the evidence they had collected. The couple agreed, understanding that formal documentation would be crucial in any legal proceedings. At the station, the atmosphere was calm and professional, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous day. They met with two officers who listened patiently as they described the events in detail. The wife recounted the shove and slap, the intimidation, and the threats. The husband detailed the sequence of events, the appearance of the men, and the way they had impersonated authority figures. The officers asked precise questions, ensuring that every fact was clear. "This is clearly assault and impersonation of law enforcement," one officer said, reviewing the photos and footage. "We'll open an investigation and ensure that these individuals are held accountable. You've done the right thing by documenting everything and reporting it immediately." The couple felt a sense of relief. While they knew the process would take time, there was now an official acknowledgement that the incident was serious. It was not being dismissed as a minor disagreement or an overreaction. Their voices were being heard and their experience validated. Returning home, they felt the weight of exhaustion settle over them. The emotional and physical toll of the incident, combined with the constant vigilance, had left them drained. They sat together on the couch holding hands, each drawing strength from the other. "We made it through yesterday," the husband said quietly. "And today we took steps to make sure it doesn't happen again," The wife nodded. It's scary, but we're not powerless. We have each other, and we have people who will help us. That makes a difference. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they began to see the first signs of community support. Neighbors came by with small gestures, baked goods, notes of encouragement, and offers to help if needed. It wasn't just about sympathy. It was a way of saying, we see what happened, and we stand with you. These small acts provided a sense of solidarity that made the couple feel less isolated. Despite the support, there was still a lingering tension. The HOA, or at least the aggressive members, were still a presence in the back of their minds. Every rustle of leaves, every knock at the door, every unfamiliar vehicle passing by triggered a brief moment of anxiety. They had learned that vigilance was necessary, that their safety was paramount. As night fell, the couple reflected on the day's events. They had faced not only physical aggression but also the psychological weight of being threatened in their own home. They had taken steps to protect themselves, sought professional guidance, and involved law enforcement. Each action was a reclaiming of power, a refusal to be victims in a situation designed to intimidate and humiliate. They spent the night discussing plans for the coming days. They would continue documenting everything, maintain communication with their lawyer, and work with the police to ensure the investigation proceeded smoothly. They also considered ways to strengthen their home's security further, adding cameras, better locks, and motion-sensitive lights. It was not paranoia. It was preparation. Through all of this, the couple remained connected. The shared ordeal had strengthened their bond, reminding them that they were not just facing a threat individually but as a team. The husband held his wife's hand, offering reassurance. The wife rested her head on his shoulder, finding comfort in their unity. Together they could face the challenges ahead. The events of this day marked a turning point. The initial attack had been violent and shocking, but the aftermath, the way they handled it, the steps they took, the support they received, was a testament to their resilience. They were learning to navigate a world where threats could come from unexpected places, and where courage was required not just in moments of confrontation, but in every decision that followed. By the time they went to bed, exhaustion had finally overtaken them. Their bodies ached, their minds raced, but there was a quiet determination beneath it all. They had survived the confrontation, taken the right steps to protect themselves, and begun the process of reclaiming their sense of safety. The journey was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever came next. As they drifted into sleep, their last thoughts were of vigilance and hope. The memory of the slap and the aggression was still fresh, but it no longer held power over them. They had faced danger, taken action, and begun to restore control over their lives. And in that moment they knew that whatever challenges the HOA or its members might present in the future, they would face them together, strong, determined, and unbroken. The days that followed were filled with a mix of determination, caution, and careful planning. The couple knew that the confrontation with the HOA cops was far from over. Their immediate safety had been restored by the police response and their own vigilance, but the real battle was only beginning. This was not just about a single incident anymore. It was about making sure that those who had threatened them were held accountable and that their home remained a safe place. The first step was organizing all the evidence they had gathered. They had photos, video recordings, and notes from the previous encounters. Every detail mattered: the time of day, the positioning of the intruders, the words spoken, and the physical actions taken. They reviewed the footage frame by frame, noting every gesture and movement. The husband labeled each clip carefully, while the wife wrote down exact quotes she remembered from the confrontation. They treated it like a puzzle, knowing that the more precise and organized their records were, the stronger their case would be. Afterward, they made a detailed timeline of events. From the first appearance of the men outside their home to the moment the ambulance arrived, everything was documented. They also recorded the aftermath: the calls to the police, the statements taken, the support from neighbors, and the legal consultation. It was painstaking work, but it gave them a sense of control. In the chaos of what had happened, they finally had a way to assert authority over their own story. Once the documentation was complete, the couple scheduled a formal meeting with their lawyer. The office was quiet and professional, with shelves full of legal books and certificates on the wall. Their lawyer welcomed them warmly but quickly got down to business. From what you've described and the evidence you've collected, you have a strong case, the lawyer said. These individuals committed assault, harassment, and impersonation of authority figures. We can pursue criminal charges, and we can also consider a civil suit to hold them accountable for the damage they caused. The couple listened carefully, absorbing the gravity of the situation. It was comforting to have a professional acknowledge the seriousness of what had happened, but it was also daunting. Legal processes could take months or even years, and they would require patience, persistence, and courage. "We're ready to do whatever it takes," the husband said firmly. "We just want to make sure this doesn't happen again, to us or to anyone else." The lawyer nodded. "Good. We'll start by filing formal complaints with the police department and the local authorities. We'll make sure that the HOA is investigated thoroughly, and we'll prepare all the necessary documents for potential court proceedings." With guidance from their lawyer, the couple began reaching out to the local community. They wanted to make sure that neighbors were aware of what had happened, but in a responsible way that would not escalate tensions unnecessarily. They went door to door, speaking quietly with those they trusted, explaining the events and the seriousness of the situation. Many neighbors expressed sympathy and offered support, ranging from help with home security to simply being available as witnesses if needed. Some neighbors shared stories of their own, experiences with the HOA. Small complaints that had seemed minor suddenly made sense in the context of what the couple had faced. It became clear that this was not an isolated incident. The HOA, or at least some members of it, had a pattern of aggressive behavior. The couple realized that by standing up, they were not just protecting themselves, they were giving a voice to others who might have felt powerless. At home, the couple continued reinforcing their security. They added more cameras around the property, installed better locks, and set up motion-sensitive lights to illuminate any approach at night. Every precaution was taken to ensure that no one could enter uninvited again. While these steps required effort and expense, the peace of mind they brought was invaluable. The wife often checked the cameras, watching the live feed on her tablet, while the husband double-checked locks and doors. It became a shared ritual, a way to maintain a sense of safety while remaining alert. Despite these precautions, the tension was never fully gone. Every time they heard footsteps outside, every time a car slowed near their driveway, their hearts would race. But they learned to manage it. The fear was there, yes, but it no longer controlled them. They had faced danger and survived, and they were determined not to let the threat dictate their lives. A week later, the police reached out with updates. The investigation had begun in earnest. Officers had interviewed other witnesses, examined security footage, and confirmed the identities of the HOA members involved. It became clear that these men had acted without any legal authority and had deliberately crossed the line. The couple felt a mix of relief and anticipation, relief that justice was underway, and anticipation of the moment when the perpetrators would face consequences. Throughout this period, the couple leaned heavily on each other. The emotional toll of reliving the incident through meetings, calls, and legal preparations was significant. They spoke openly about their fears, their anger, and their frustrations. They cried together, laughed together when moments of absurdity arose, and reminded each other of their shared strength. The ordeal, as exhausting as it was, strengthened their bond. They realized that unity and trust were just as important as legal action in surviving such an experience. Community support continued to grow. Some neighbors offered to accompany the couple if they needed to go to meetings or court appointments. Others volunteered to help monitor the property during the day, keeping an eye out for any suspicious activity. These gestures, small as they were, reminded the couple that they were not alone. The solidarity of the neighborhood provided a sense of empowerment that no legal document alone could offer. Amid the legal preparations, the couple also focused on healing personally. The wife took time to rest, care for herself, and process the trauma of being physically assaulted. The husband spent quiet moments reflecting, writing down thoughts and meditating to manage stress. They learned that resilience was not just about confrontation. It was also about self-care, patience, and emotional recovery. As the weeks went by, the couple noticed subtle shifts. The HOA members who had threatened them seemed more cautious, as if aware that their actions were being scrutinized. Rumors of investigations and potential legal consequences spread through the neighborhood. While this did not erase the danger entirely, it created a sense of accountability. The couple had made it clear that threats would not be ignored, and that their voices mattered. One afternoon, the couple received a formal letter from the HOA requesting a meeting. They were wary but decided to attend, accompanied by their lawyer. The meeting was tense, with the HOA representatives attempting to downplay the incident. They tried to frame the confrontation as a misunderstanding, claiming that their actions were justified. But the couple remained calm and resolute, presenting their evidence and recounting the events clearly and consistently. The lawyer spoke firmly, making it clear that the actions of the HOA members had been illegal and unacceptable. The couple noticed a shift in the tone of the meeting as their preparedness and confidence became apparent. The representatives could no longer dismiss or intimidate them. By the end of the discussion, it was clear that the couple had asserted their authority, protected their rights, and refused to be silenced. At home that evening, they reflected on the progress they had made. The journey had been exhausting and emotionally taxing, but it was yielding results. They had survived an aggressive and unlawful attack, taken steps to secure their home, involved law enforcement, documented everything, and begun the legal process to ensure accountability. They had also built a support network in their community, creating a foundation of safety and solidarity that could not be ignored. Despite the progress, the couple remained vigilant. They knew that legal processes could take time, and that patience and persistence were crucial. Each day required attention to detail, communication with authorities, and ongoing preparation. But now there was also a growing sense of confidence. They had faced danger, and they had learned that they could stand firm, protect themselves, and reclaim control over their lives. The emotional weight of the ordeal gradually began to lighten. While the memory of the slap and the threats would never fully disappear, it no longer dominated their thoughts. Instead, it became a reminder of their courage, their resilience, and the power of standing up for oneself. They realized that fear was not weakness. It was a signal that action was needed, and in taking action, they had not only protected themselves but had also inspired others in the neighborhood to stand up against abuse of power. By the end of this part of the journey, the couple had transformed. From feeling vulnerable and threatened, they had become vigilant, proactive, and empowered. They had learned the importance of documentation, legal action, and community support. They had discovered inner strength and resilience, and they had reinforced the bond that allowed them to face challenges together. As they prepared for the next steps, court appearances, further investigations, and ongoing security measures, they did so with a sense of calm determination. The events of the previous weeks had been harrowing, but they had also been transformative. The couple now understood that standing up against